Hello, my name is Mary Key, and I'm here with Rob Geske, and we are from the Air Safety Institute at AOPA. We are here today to discuss an early analysis on an aircraft accident.
The accident we'll be looking at involved a Cirrus SR22 that crashed Monday, July 7th. The pilot and his family of 3 all perished in the accident.
The pilot was a private pilot traveling from Merritt Island, Florida to Sanford, North Carolina, and crashed on a 4-mile final to Runway 3 into Raleigh Executive Jetport. The NTSB won't release the cause of the accident until they complete their investigation, which will come out in about 18 to 24 months. What we do know is the pilot was experiencing radio problems very early on in the flight.
Orlando approach, do you have me? Or Jacksonville Center, do you have a copy? 569. Our radio is going in and out, not sure what's going on, but we seem to be having some type of an electrical problem, so if you lose us, you might want that noted in your system. CFR currently to Tango Tango Alpha, if you can hear me. It's in and out. I think we're going to lose you, though, and it's not the frequency. It's something to do with the radio. The radio's going in and out 569.
The pilot is struggling with communicating to ATC and has conveyed at a number of points the issues. Mary, do you think that this is a true emergency, or what would you be doing at this point?
I don't think that this seems like a true emergency at this point. I mean, any pilot knows that you can continue on without your radios. That's totally fine. I think one of the biggest issues is that he doesn't know what's happening with his electrical system. It's one thing to take off knowing that you don't have radios, but to run into this issue mid-flight and not know what is happening to your system or if something bigger is going wrong, I think that's something that would need to be addressed.
And I think it's important to point out in a VFR cross-country, it's not necessarily an immediate emergency, but in the IFR world, as we've flown, the loss of radio starts to quickly become an emergency. And as you pointed out, the loss of radios in the VFR environment isn't necessarily an immediate emergency, but in an IFR environment, it certainly calls for an immediate action and a potential emergency.
Absolutely. The pilot made the decision to continue up the coast to his final destination. He somehow is able to get in contact with the local FBO to advise that he's on his way in without radios. We don't know how he got in contact with the FBO, potentially using his cell phone.
I think this is a really interesting point. The aircraft that are in the pattern, there's 2 of them, are alerted by the FBO over the frequency, on the radio frequency, and they begin clearing the airspace for this aircraft to come in under distress. For a non-towered environment, it's great coordination.
Raleigh Executive Unicom, this is FBO. Please be advised there's a Cirrus November 5656 Mike, about 3 miles south of the field. They're wanting to come in runway 03. They are potential engine failure. They have no communications.
Raleigh, for traffic, flight of 84 for them Tango. We're left down. We're going to go ahead and break off to a 360. We'll wait for that traffic to come in.
Exec 80 Alpha, upwind, runway 21, pattern altitude. We're going to hold this course until we see the Cirrus. Raleigh Exec.
Raleigh Exec Unicom, any updates on that inbound aircraft in distress?
Do we know what happened to the Cirrus?
Well, he was 3 miles out. I've been out here 5 miles out for a while. Haven't seen anything.
Oh boy.
I don't see him at all.
This is FBO. We're trying to get a hold of the airplane right now. It seems we lost radio with comms with them. Is anybody able to see them about south of the airport?
What's their tail number?
5656 Mike.
As you can hear in the audio, the FBO is reporting that the pilot is experiencing engine and alternator issues.
I think it's interesting at this point, especially given the flight data, it's looking more and more like there is an underlying electrical issue, and we can certainly circle back to the engine issue. But this aircraft, the 22, is equipped with 2 alternators, 2 batteries, and while the pilot elected to continue the flight down the coast, at this point we can see that they're starting to have a cascade failure, and that's going to be more challenging. And this especially becomes problematic if we talk about engine issues when we look at the fuel system.
Exactly, because the fuel gauges in the Cirrus are electrically powered, so if he did lose his electrical system and he lost the fuel gauges, he's not going to be able to see how much fuel is in each tank. And with his fuel selector, he might have lost track of how much fuel is in each tank and potentially even run out of fuel in a tank.
And this issue, some pilots help remediate by having a message come up on the Cirrus display itself to remind them to switch tanks. If we've lost the electrical system, we won't be able to display that message. We won't be able to see the gauges, as we've mentioned, which can lead to a rough-running engine or an engine not producing full power. While the checklist should cover what to do in this event, This pilot is already kind of overwhelmed by the electrical issues, the navigational issues, and we ultimately find ourselves at the scene of the crash.
In the pictures from the wreckage, you can see that all of the components are contained to a pretty tight space, and even the NTSB reported in their conference that the scene of the accident was very small. Rob, can you explain why that is something that the NTSB looks at, what it tells them?
Yeah, it's just an investigative tool. It helps if we think of an in-flight breakup. That aircraft is breaking up in flight, so those pieces begin to kind of scatter, and they're spread out over a much wider area. The fact that the majority of the aircraft components are all clustered at that area tells us that it's less likely an in-flight breakup, and while there might be a component failure, something wrong with the aircraft systems, it does kind of rule things out, and it's just another great kind of tool helping us understand what the NTSB will be looking for at this point in the accident.
Absolutely, and it probably indicates some type of potential loss of control.
I certainly think so. Given the position of the aircraft and how it looks, the NTSB will have a better understanding based on what the impact looks like and kind of how the plane is positioned. You know, if it's more of a loss control, if there's a greater downward velocity like a stall or a spin and some rotation than there is if there's a C-fit where we would see a large ground scar. The aircraft came under power and slid across the ground a significant portion. Again, I think that will be revealed in the prelim. What I did find interesting is there wasn't a CAPS deployed.
I noticed that too. Very interesting. And for our viewers who aren't familiar with the Cirrus, the CAPS system is the Cirrus Airframe Parachute System. And the pilot can deploy a parachute that's actually attached to the airframe of the plane. And in the event of emergency, it can safely help the airplane down to the ground for a safe impact.
And it's certainly a emergency tool. It's a tool in the toolkit. It's not always required to be deployed in certain situations. And while all of the pilots should receive the appropriate training on its use, its limitations, and when to use it, I do have a question lingering in the back of my mind about this parachute. It was repacked recently, which means it has an electrically actuated rocket, so it needs an electrical signal that comes off the battery. And we have this aircraft that's struggling with an electrical failure, a potential cascading electrical failure. What do we think is the potential that the parachute would even work?
Right, so the parachute system is actually mechanically driven, but it's the igniter, like you said, that actually does require the electrical portion. And we do know that that part is hardwired to the batteries, so the master switch doesn't have to be on for it to get that electrical current. But like you said, if the battery doesn't have any juice left, it's not going to have that electricity that it needs to ignite the rocket. So if the pilot didn't have his batteries, is there a potential that the CAP system didn't work?
And I certainly think that will be something the NTSB looks into, or hopefully they'll look into. I know the design standards may have already addressed this, if you can still fire the parachute with a low battery, or you know, if we can get to the theoretical zero where it is truly dead, it won't work. But again, I certainly think that will be part of the investigation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think CAPS aside, a key takeaway with this is not letting a non-emergency turn into an emergency. This pilot knew he was having electrical problems over Daytona Beach when he started losing his radios and didn't know what was happening with his system.
And looking at this aircraft, the 22 has 2 comm radios, 2 alternators, 2 batteries, a series of redundancies is built in to help elevate safety. I mean, that can lure pilots into a self-sense of security, but what should be done in the event that you lose 1 of 2 radios or 1 of 2 of your redundant systems?
I know at the airlines, the training, if you lose an engine, is to treat it like an emergency, to land as soon as possible. You get priority to the runway, but actually nothing is wrong with the plane. The plane still flies fine, all the systems are working. The emergency is that you have lost that redundancy. And I think it's really important to use those redundancies to your advantage.
And one of the problems I think we're seeing here is a cascading failure. We're seeing, as we talk about accident change, it's not one thing. It's a series of little things that slowly build over time that bring us to the unfortunate outcome of this accident. And this is a sense where we get from this pilot that it's something is minor, but the frame of reference for their mind isn't right. And they keep thinking, oh, it's minor and I can deal with it, I just need to get home. And there's that self-induced time pressure perhaps to get there. But we also have the issue of they're flying, they get back home, they get close to home. What do you think's going through the pilot's mind at this point?
Yeah, he sees the airport, he knows he's close, the mileage is getting smaller and smaller, and he gets that feeling like he's made it.
And it's important. The aircraft, if the electrical system isn't working, the flaps are certainly not going to be deployed. So what does that tell us about our stalling speed and the pattern that we should be flying?
And that's something that's really not a part of training anywhere, is landing without your flaps. Now, we don't know whether he has trained for that or not, but it's not something that anybody is necessarily proficient in doing. So if you are having to come in without flaps and potentially even using your unfamiliar speed gauge because your PFD is not working, that's all a lot different than what you're used to.
And that standby airspeed indicator, as you mentioned, is down and to the left of the pilot as opposed to front of frame where the PFD. So now you have that head movement looking down at it and trying to get back up, and moving the head, having blank screens in front of you, potentially a struggling engine, and you're almost there. It quickly becomes easy to not recognize your stall speeds, or to get slow, or to have a tighter turn to keep it tight to the runway so you can land with that engine out, which is it's difficult to land well with engine and everything and functioning, but without an engine, without an electrical system, we're certainly creating a more challenging situation.
Absolutely. And with those cascading failures, I think that just shows another takeaway of making sure that you know your systems and know how your airplane works, so that you know if you do start to have an electrical problem, what is going to happen in the chain of events after that. Or if you have an engine failure, what is going to happen, so that you can make the safest decisions based on what you know your airplane's going to do.
And I think for this pilot, their decision making starts to show some cracks. The decision to continue with an issue, the decision to continue to their destination. And while pilots all can kind of relate and understand that, they probably were familiar with that airport. They wanted to get their family home. Their mechanic is most likely there. All of that, they are seemingly, pushing to get there for that familiarity.
Rob, I think you said it perfectly. I think our third key takeaway here is a classic example of get-home-itis. What are the next steps we can expect from the NTSB on this?
Well, the NTSB will continue their investigation. We've mentioned that prelim report will be released within 3 weeks. Ideally, they'll hopefully be able to tie in more audio, maybe if there's radar, ADS-B track, whatever they have. It is worth noting this aircraft does have a flight data recording capability in the avionics, but that feature fails when you lose battery power. So once the main screen shut off, it no longer captures that. Hopefully there is some data, perhaps prior to the event, that can help point to what's going on. But again, that will ideally show up in the prelims if they have it. And then that final report, as we've mentioned, 18 to 24 months.
Thank you for watching. We hope what you learned today will help make you a safer pilot going forward. If you have a story similar to this one, we'd like to hear from you. Please share it in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting ASI.